It's one of the most divisive issues in America. Immigration is splitting public opinion and polarizing politics here.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. It won't be.
In today's show, we'll be going behind the headlines to ask where the Trump administration stands legally in their continuing hardline stance against asylum seekers. And we'll be finding out what everyday life is like for people caught up in the US-Mexico border crisis. Here in New York, The Square starts now. Welcome to Times Square in New York. I'm Sally Ihan. On this show, we'll be talking about a topic that dominates the media every day here in America, and that's immigration. And we want to hear from you, so please send us your questions and comments on Facebook and Twitter at TRT World and join in on the conversation. Now, President Donald Trump campaigned on a promise of building a border wall to secure the US border. Now, after almost 3 years, is immigration a losing battle for the president, whose actions have sparked both political and legal roadblocks at every step of the way? We'll discuss all these issues with my guests, but first let's put the matter in a global context. With me here in the studio is Nanette Kelly, the director of the New York office of UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Nanette, thanks so much for joining us.
Very nice to be here.
Now, is what's happening on the US border in line with the global trends of displacement?
Well, last year we just recently came out with our global trends, which showed at the end of 2018 there were over 70 million people globally who had to flee their homes because of war, persecution, and violence. And when you look at that number, that's actually the size of France or the size of Thailand, just to give your viewers a sense of what the magnitude is. Most of these people, 2/3 of them, are located in developing countries, countries that are often the least able to support such mass new arrivals of refugees. And the developed world is relatively sheltered from those kind of numbers. Having said that, it is true that in recent months, the US has seen a big surge of people fleeing northern Central America for a whole host of reasons, but including violence and persecution in their countries of origin. So what the US is experiencing right now within a global context is similar to what is experienced by other countries when you see a large arrival of persons in a relatively short period of time.
A lot of the conversation here in US, of course, is on the undocumented immigrant. For those seeking asylum and for those moving across the border in an unauthorised way, under international human rights law, it's considered legal, yet under US law, they're considered illegal aliens. How does the UNHCR reconcile, asylum seekers and their rights of protection under international human rights law in this situation?
Well, let's go back a little bit and remember why we have an international protection regime, and that came out of the Second World War, where people were fleeing persecution, fleeing mass violence, and the international community came together and signed an international convention to protect these persons, which guarantees the right to seek and claim asylum. It doesn't guarantee the right to asylum, it guarantees the right to claim it and have your claim determined in a fair process.
I suppose, in all fairness from the country involved, though, it's hard to determine whether or not those people are fleeing for economic reasons or whether they're fleeing persecution or violence.
Countries need to have at their border stations and elsewhere a system that's able to determine who do meet a refugee definition and who should not. And that's what one of the things UNHCR does, is help countries develop those procedures.
I wanted to touch on the power of media in telling the story of asylum seekers and immigrants around the world. A photo that's been circulating online lately is a very tragic one of the Salvadorian man and his daughter. How important is it that we face these very tragic and uncomfortable photos in order to get a real depth and understanding of the crisis at large?
I think it helps a lot. Because if you just talk of statistics, people don't really know how to identify with a statistic. There's a great saying that says, a death of one person is a tragedy, the death of 1 million persons is a statistic. And it's so true. When you see that man and his child face down, drowned, you have to say to yourself, what is it? Why did that man take on so much risk What propelled him to move? And it forces the viewer to try to unpack and think about what are the circumstances that force so many people to flee in that manner.
I want to move now to how this crisis is affecting the community and those directly impacted on the border of the US and Mexico. My colleague Lionel Donovan travelled to Tijuana to talk to people there about what life is really like. But we should warn you, though, you may find some of the images that we just discussed quite disturbing.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be.
Immigration is probably the most divisive issue in U.S. politics. President Donald Trump vowed to build a wall to stop people entering into the U.S. It's been court action after court action, debate, and political maneuvering, but the two opposing political sides are no closer to being on the same page. Immigration is never out of the headlines. But I wanted to get to the heart of the matter and find out what is behind what we see in the media every day. I've come to hear the stories of the people who are living the issue every day, and that's the residents of the U.S.-Mexico border towns. Sylvia Ocampo is like so many people who seek opportunities across the U.S. border. Sylvia says she simply wants a better life, so she left Mexico.
Decidí ir a Estados Unidos a vivir.
I moved to the US so I could have a better life, because here in Mexico, salaries are low. Food and rent is very expensive. You can't survive on $10 a day. We all want to go to the US. We want to work hard because you get paid more.
For 25 years, Sylvia lived in the U.S., working various housekeeping jobs in Los Angeles. During that time, she found a husband and together they raised 2 children. But when it was revealed that she didn't have the proper documentation, Sylvia was forced to leave all of that behind.
After they deported me, it became very difficult for me and my daughter. I don't earn enough money.
Despite Trump's hardline stance on immigration, deportations actually went down during the first fiscal year of his presidency. There was a slight rise at the end of Trump's second year, but nowhere close compared to the numbers seen in the Obama administration. This may be because of the U.S.'s growing backlog of deportation cases. Since Trump took office and started calling for the arrest of undocumented immigrants with minor or even no criminal offenses, it seems as though authorities are arresting people much faster than they can deport them. 2017 saw a sharp rise in pending deportation cases, and it has increased since then. And this growing bottleneck means a swell in deportation numbers is unlikely. But this hasn't stopped Trump from using immigration as his primary campaign tool, his most famous being the call for a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border.
Can you imagine those caravans without having the barriers and walls that we've already put up and that are up? This country would be a mess like you wouldn't believe. So the wall is moving along. It's moving along rapidly. It's beautiful. I changed the design. It's stronger, bigger, better, and cheaper.
The country is split. Many strongly disagree with Trump, but many in America want increased border security, in whatever form it may take. In El Paso, many residents have long campaigned for better security.
We are here to bring attention to the fact that there isn't a wall here, that we have to secure our nation, and at the same time we are securing the nation. All of these people will be able to live in peace, because all the drug and human trafficking that passes through here won't happen here. They will have to find somewhere else.
Others are wondering if there was a lack of focus on immigration during the previous administration. Trump supporters say there are plenty of legal avenues to enter the U.S., too many in fact. So entering illegally is unacceptable. no matter what the circumstances.
I'm going to say one thing about the children being separated at the border. The news says that President Trump is racist now because they're being separated. What happened when Barack Obama was doing it? Nobody called him racist then.
If you're going to do it right, you're going to do it the legal way, not jumping the border. And most of these people that jump in the border are very low-class, uneducated, criminal people. I do not want that in my country.
You know, immigrants. We immigrate from...
I'm in downtown Tijuana, just over the Mexico border, to meet with Maria Gaeta. Maria is the head of an organization that helps deportees like Sylvia adjust to life back in Mexico. She says that trying to adjust to life in Mexico is tough, and people leave entire lives behind in the U.S.
Well, I've been here 5 years, and honestly, it's almost the same. Only the difference that I see now is people being deported even if they have a residence. A lot of times they have the citizenship. They're American by naturalization, and they lost that.
Why do they want to go back after they've already been deported?
Well, the reason why is because they have the family there. They have everything, all the belongings, and also they grew up in the United States. Most of those people you're talking is people who grow up in the United States and live all their lives there. And they had the wives and the kids and family. That's the reason why they want to go back.
My daughter is very sad. At night she thinks about her brothers in the US. I tell her that she will go there, but I can't go there because I don't have a passport like her. I've already been denied twice, and I'm appealing my case. She keeps telling me she wants to go back to San Diego, but this is impossible, as she has to stay with me.
Pastor Gustavo Bonda showed me around his church that he has opened up to refugees coming to Mexico so that they can rest on their way to the U.S. border. Pastor Bonda says he sees the suffering up close.
The people from Haiti, from Venezuela, from Brazil, from Chile, is the same story. They say there are nothing in their countries in this moment, and their dream is go to the USA. It's not easy because it's a long way to get here. Some of them, they don't have nothing.
Despite the dangers and hardships, many migrants in Tijuana are undeterred in their quest to make it to the U.S.
I want to cross the border because I have nothing in Haiti, no education for my kids, no job for me, and I need to help my family.
Enrique Chiu is an artist in Tijuana. Enrique has seen and heard the stories of migrants trying to get into the U.S. firsthand, and he says he knows what the border wall represents to so many.
I sent a letter to the ICE department to give me the permit to paint the border, so the department, they came to me and they said, yeah, we're going to give you the permit, but only you have to paint on the Mexican side. That's okay, that's the side has to be painted, you know? Because for Mexico, Central, South America, that limit, that border symbolizes something. But on the other side, it's just like a wall, you know, like something like you're in your house, you know, like some wall, you know, like you don't have to get into my place. But on this side, for a lot of people, it's like the limit of the dreams.
Enrique feels that with all the attention the issue is getting in the U.S. and even across the world, Tijuana is the place where vulnerable people should be able to express their views on the immigration crisis.
We know for sure we send a message. That's what I use in the border wall for, you know, like a big canvas, like something to express yourself. And everyone is looking at the border right now. So if you want to really send a big message or an important message to the world, that's the canvas you have to use right now.
But for Sylvia, the message is simple.
I
would like to return to the US. That's my dream, because I want my children to have a better life than they do over here. I would like the US president to understand our plight and be aware of how we live. We know that he's religious, but his rejection of us is not very Christian. We would like him to show us some humanity.
So let's bring in our guests here to discuss the issue further. With me in the studio is Elizabeth Frankel. She's a lawyer and Associate Director of Young Centre for Immigrant Children's Rights, and Republican strategist Sari Kim, who joins us from Washington, DC. Thanks for joining us to you both. Firstly to you, Elizabeth. Now, we heard there in the piece that the Trump administration and the headlines are calling what's happening on the border a crisis. As someone who's navigating the legal system and the immigration system, how do you view this? Is it a crisis?
Ultimately, I think, a lot of the crisis is of the administration's own making. The administration has ended policies and practices that were in place that were working. For example, there was a program in place, it was called the Family Case Management Program, and it was a program that allowed families to be released from custody, and they would have a case manager who would support them and help ensure that they attended immigration proceedings and followed through with legal obligations. And that program had a 99% approval rating, and instead of continuing that program, which was relatively inexpensive, the Trump administration in 2017 ended the program and instead decided to start separating parents and children at the border and placing both parents and children in custody for very extended lengths of time.
And the separation of families doesn't just stop at the separation policy that Trump brought in over the last year or so. It also refers to the deportation of undocumented parents of American children. And like we just saw with Sylvia there, who is deported and has her American child in Mexico. What hope do people like that have of re-entering the US legally?
Oh, it's very, very difficult. And we see this a lot. And of course, right now, we just heard that the administration is planning to do more raids on families. And so, a lot more families are going to end up separated. We worked with a family about a year ago that was a family of 6 people living in a home. The government came at 7 in the morning, 8 ICE agents, and arrested 6 people. 3 of them were under 12 years old. 2 of the younger children had orders of removal from 5 years prior. They were 5 and 7 years old when they were ordered removed from the United States because they failed to attend an immigration court hearing. So these are, by all intents and purposes, kids who have grown up in the United States. They spoke fluent English, they attended school here, and yet now they face return to countries that they haven't lived in for many, many years.
Sari, I'd like to turn to you on a point here. Given that there are so many undocumented immigrants in the US that have had children, American children, on home soil, what purpose does it serve the US by deporting these parents?
First and foremost, it is the law. When President Reagan was in office, he worked with the United States Congress to create IRA. And if you commit a felony crime, you are deported from this country. 2, the issue of deportation and the enforcements of United States immigration law has been a persistent part of this country. When President Obama was in office, he deported more illegal immigrants than any other president, 2.9 million. President George W. Bush deported 2.1 million. President Bill Clinton deported 870,000. And between 1892 and when President Bill Clinton was in office, the United States deported 2.1 million illegal immigrants. And 3, as it relates to unaccompanied minor children, prior to President Trump being in office, there were approximately 10,000 unaccompanied minor children. Since he became president of the United States, there have been an additional 2,000. We have to focus on the fact that it is the Central American Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras that is responsible for the 1.5 million illegal immigrants that have crossed from Mexico into the United States since 2014.
Hang on, Sari. The largest number of illegal immigrants settling in the US each year are those who actually stay in the country and outstay visas. So there is a large focus on the border that the Central American countries are to blame here, but it's those who outstay their visas that actually make up the largest proportion.
Well, I'm not disputing your number about outstaying visas. I'm saying that we are focusing this conversation on the country of Mexico. But in fact, it is those Central Northern American countries of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador who are coming to the United States, claiming refugee status, seeking asylum, and they are responsible for clogging the immigration courts.
Elizabeth, what do you say to that?
So a few things. I mean, first of all, there's nothing illegal about coming to the U.S. and asking for asylum. That is very much a legal process and something that is provided for in our immigration laws. Second, a lot of these individuals who have been ordered removed, you can be ordered removed in absentia, meaning that you fail to appear for an immigration court hearing. And in a lot of cases, these are young children and families who simply didn't know that they had to appear in immigration court. The notice to appear was sent to the wrong address, and so as a result, these families are ordered removed. So they didn't, in fact, have their day in court. And then the third thing I would say is that, you know, the idea that these are mostly criminals is simply wrong. And under the Obama administration, while it's true that the deportations were at an all-time high, the difference was the individuals that were prioritized. And the Obama administration did not focus on deporting families, young children, the way the Trump administration has really placed such an emphasis on young people.
Now, we've seen a lot in the headlines about the state of the detention facilities in the southwest border. It's prompted Democratic lawmakers to scrutinise the Trump administration and how it's handling the surge. What has actually sparked this renewed interest and focus on the immigration detention centres?
Right, so by law, the children are only supposed to be held in Customs and Border Patrol stations for no more than 72 hours before they get transferred to facilities that are appropriate for children. And what has happened in the last few weeks and months is that children are being held in Customs and Border Patrol stations for much longer periods of time. Part of that is because Health and Human Services, the agency that normally cares for children, has had a backlog and has not been able to place children as quickly in beds. But as a result, children are spending time in these conditions that are just not at all, safe or clean or what a child should be exposed to.
We know now as well that immigration customs enforcement are stepping up raids. There are more people being transferred to these detention centres, yet there's a backlog. Sari, do you think that there has been an issue in terms of really thinking through the logistics here and not thinking about the conditions in which these people are being held?
Well, the number one issue that people should focus on is if they read the appropriation budget justification for the department who is responsible for this, they are short 16,000 Border Patrol agents. They don't have the staff. The United States does not have the staff in order to ensure these processes and procedures are going into place. It's like going into Istanbul on an airplane and having one person monitor hundreds of thousands of people.
But wouldn't that be the responsibility of the government to make sure that they've got the staff and resources in place in order to carry, their policies through?
Certainly, but the hiring issue in the United States government existed prior to President Trump. It was an issue with President Obama. It was an issue with George W. Bush. It is an issue with President Clinton. What you see is an exacerbation of it because these countries, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, these citizens in those countries are choosing to leave their countries as opposed to enforcing the rule of law, traveling 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 miles into the United States across Mexico, and then demanding that they be given conditions for asylum. That is not how the whole world works.
What do you say to that, Elizabeth? Do you think that the government have thought about the logistics of actually trying to deport these hundreds of thousands of people?
I think that the government has had plenty of time to think about this. It's not a surprise. It's not like the numbers are so much higher than they've been in the past. And I think to the point about there not being sufficient Customs and Border Patrol agents, what we're talking about in these facilities is just very basic care. Things like access to medical care when a child is very sick, toothbrushes, toothpaste, being able to sleep not on a concrete floor with a paper blanket. And you're talking about kids in these conditions for weeks on end. So we're not talking about huge expenditures of resources in order to meet sort of basic human requirements.
We touched on the idea of media earlier. Sari, I wanted to get your point here. Do you think that there's enough compassion around the human rights angle here? Do you think that the media is reporting the genuine truth of the situation of what people are actually going through in these detention centres and trying to cross the border?
I absolutely do. I think every American, every global citizen, every media person does at heart have a place of compassion, and they are reporting these stories because they feel sorry for these individuals. I myself feel sorry for these individuals because I was fortunate enough to be born to parents who came to the United States legally. But we have to remember there is a selective morality when you heighten the story of a child in Honduras and you forget there are 11 million American children here in the United States that go to bed hungry every day.
There's also the question, though, Elizabeth, that perhaps there's not enough access to report correctly on this story. Is there a double-edged sword when it comes to compassion and morality, speaking in our ivory tower rather than actually reporting from the field itself?
I think that first of all, it's important that this story is being covered and that it's being covered accurately, and that we are trying to tell the stories of the individuals we're working with to sort of help explain why people are coming to the U.S., that these aren't families that are trying to sort of take advantage of our immigration laws, but are really fleeing harm. I think that, the media attention has brought a lot of pressure to bear on the administration and some of the policies that, for example, the zero tolerance policy where separated children were, sort of hundreds of individual children were being separated from parents, and it was really that, media attention and then the public outrage that ultimately stopped the administration from doing what they were doing.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you both for a very interesting discussion. So as we move towards the presidential election next year, no doubt we can expect to be talking about immigration issues a lot more. Thanks to my guests, Elizabeth Frankel here in the studio and Seri Kim in Washington, and to the team here in New York. I'm Sally Ihan. See you next time on The Square.